Oftentimes when people encounter the dawah, they're a little bit confused and they will pose certain questions. One of the most common questions that they usually pose to us is, if you guys are really associated with the Prophet Muhammad, if you're really associated with Islam, if you're really associated with Imam al-Mehdi, why is it that your women are not even wearing hijab? Why is it that you guys are not calling to pray 5 times a day? Why is it that even though we are fasting in the month of Ramadan, and we see the Sunnis are fasting in the month of Ramadan, and the Shia are also fasting in the same month of Ramadan, we find you guys are not fasting in that same month? Why is it that your laws and your jurisprudence and your practices are different than what we have known? And the answer comes really in the Gospels, when we look at the story of Jesus and his dawah and his call. We find that Jesus was the Messiah who was sent to the Jews, and him and his disciples at the beginning of their dawah also were questioned by many people and asked the same questions which we are. In the Gospels, at one point, the followers of John the Baptist, who had accepted the prophethood of John the Baptist, unlike the Pharisees who rejected John the Baptist's prophethood, they would say to Jesus and his disciples, "We're Jews and we're fasting, and we see that the Jews who don't accept John are also fasting, and yet you're the only one who differs. You and your disciples are not fasting. How can you claim to be the Messiah? How can you claim to be a prophet of God and speaking on behalf of God, but at the same time you're not abiding by the laws of God which came upon his servant Moses?" And Jesus tried to make them understand that by giving a few parables, and he answered them by stating, "Why would the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he is present? There will come a time when he is not present, then shall they mourn." As if Jesus was to say to them, the bridegroom is the Messiah. He's the proof of God in that time. He's the man who embodies all of religion. When that man is present, when that Spirit of God is present amongst the people, then he is the prayer, and he is the fasting, and he is all of the acts of worship. Whoever obeys him succeeds, and whoever disobeys him, no matter how many acts of worship they perform, it is not accepted from them. The love of Ali ibn Abi Talib is a good deed where no bad deed can harm, and hatred of Ali is a bad deed that no good deed can benefit. So the wilayah of that man is all of religion, is what Jesus was trying to tell them. When that man is taken away and the people are in a state of confusion, then that's when it will become a time for mourning, a time for prayer, a time for fasting. But when the Hujjah is present, it's a time of working and listening and abiding by the commandments which he gives. Another time, Jesus says to them, "Does anybody pour new wine into old wineskin? If they do so, then it will burst, and the wine will fall out and be destroyed, and also the wineskin will be destroyed." As if Jesus was trying to tell them that every so often a new covenant is established with God, and every so often new laws come that fit new times or new wineskin, and it cannot be put into old times or fit into old jurisprudences. New messages need new carriers, and it does not fit with the old. And that's exactly what Jesus did as a bearer of a covenant. He brought a new message that had to come with its new sets of rules and stipulations and regulations and laws. And on another occasion, the disciples were seen as abandoning the Sabbath, which was obligatory upon all Jews. And so Jesus and his companions were criticized for this matter. And Jesus established the proof upon them and said to them, "Do you not remember? Have you not heard the story of David and his companions when they were passing through the temple and they were hungry? And so they ate bread, consecrated bread, that was only allowed for the priests and for nobody else. That was a violation of the law. And yet David and his companions did so." And then he said, "Did you not remember the words of God when God said, 'I desire mercy, not sacrifice'? Verily, man is the Lord of Sabbath." And by these words, basically and essentially what Jesus was saying was that the laws that are put into place are not more important than the human being. For God's true religion is mercy, and not a religion of sacrifice and regulations and prayers and movements and laws. But what's more important is humanity. What's more important is mercy. What's more important is decency. What's more important is the heart. He said all these laws and regulations, all these acts of worship, and all these rituals were put into place for man and not the opposite. Hence, man is the Lord of the Sabbath. And he demonstrated and showed too that David, who was a king and a prophet, and somebody who was revered for them, was above the law and had the ability to break even the most sacred of their laws. And as such, we tell them that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he came, he did exactly the same as Jesus did. And him and his companions were questioned also about those things which they were changing in the laws of Abraham and the laws of Moses and the laws of Jesus. When the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was commanded by God to tell the Muslims that now, for the first time in 3 covenants, they had to turn their direction of worship, even though initially they were worshipping in that direction towards Jerusalem, towards the Holy Temple. Now they had to turn their faces and face for worship a new area, and that was the Kaaba in Mecca. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ established new acts of worship, prayers, fasting that were not seen before in the previous covenants, at least in that form or that way. And the reasons why Muhammad ﷺ did it were the same reasons why Jesus did it and why Moses did it. And that is because he was a companion of a new covenant. And with that new covenant came new laws which were adaptable and were specific to that particular time. And as such, we are the companions of the 7th covenant. For the hadith of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam said that when the Qa'im rises, he'll bring a new matter and a new book and a new jurisprudence. And so it is evident that in the time of Imam Mehdi and in the time of the Qa'im, the riser of the family of Muhammad, there will be a new covenant which is established, a 7th covenant. And that is what we are commanded to invite people to, a new way and a new path with its new acts of worship, a continuation of the old but not the same. The way that people feel today is the same that they felt before in those times. I think the Jews in the time of Jesus, they felt comfortable. They lost the true meaning of religion. They forgot that it was really about mercy and the love of God and about becoming a better human being, and they became attached to those rituals. It was performing these particular rituals that made them feel comfortable, made them feel spiritual. And so they got attached to the wrong thing. They left the basis of religion and they took the outer shells of religion and became attached to it. The same thing is happening now, and that is that people are perhaps afraid to look into this religion, or afraid of the religion because it doesn't have these familiar aspects to it, or acts of worship that they have become attached to, even though they really mean nothing. And they were merely tools that would help the human being gain a closer relationship with God until the establishment of a divine government, and God sends himself or his spirit through a messenger from him once again. The people unfortunately became attached to the acts and not the man, when it's the opposite. That's important.